Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. Face to Face is a revamped social media television talk show that basically is designed to ask the guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning on Face to Face, I have a highly regarded business person who has tremendous amount of business awards. He has a successful track record in the business world to also go along with international affairs and international businesses as well. The guest again this morning on Face to Face is no other than the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce, no other than Chuck Barlow Sr. Good morning, Chuck. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing fantastic this morning.
Okay, it's our pleasure to have you. Chuck, could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly before we get into our main topic of discussion?
Okay. My name is actually Charlie Frank Barlow. I'm a country boy from Jackson Barlow. People refer to me as Chuck most of the time. So I don't mind what I'm called as long as I am called.
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town in Jackson, Georgia, a sharecropper, as a matter of fact. Grew up on a farm. And I always let people know that was just one step from slavery, sharecropping, because some people don't know what that's all about. But that was a way of Black surviving after they came out of slavery. And I matriculated from high school to Morris Brown College, which was the only Black college in the state of Georgia founded by Blacks, for Blacks, by the AME Church. I attended Morris Brown College, and after graduating, I went to work for a company in New York City, money insurance company, and I got drafted into the military. Did 2 years in the military, was a sergeant in the military, came back out, worked for Xerox Corporation for 18 years. I ran a technology company for 14 years. I've had my own consulting practice for about 30 years. I have been to Africa, I believe 4 times. I've been to South Africa, Kenya, Uganda. I have learned a lot by expanding my territory, so to speak. I've learned that travel is a good way to learn, in addition to other ways of getting formal education. And something in particular about Africa that had my attention, I was something that I really wanted to do for many years. And after leaving Xerox Corporation, I had that opportunity to go to Africa, and I got very excited about it, and have continued to learn more about Africa. And I have a very strong passion to help Africans because that's my heritage. I'm a very committed family person. I am the coordinator advisor for the Barlow Family Union. We just celebrated our 82nd consecutive family union in Jackson, Georgia. So when I think family, my family is expanded past just my surname family to Africa, because I think it's so important that our children understand their background, where they came from, and connect to Africa. Because the more you know about your background and where you came from, the more confident you become. I've found that works for me. The more I know about myself and where I came from and what my roots are, it tends to make me stronger and more confident. So that's kind of me in a package. I'm involved in a lot of different things in the community. I was the loan executive for 4 presidents of Morris Brown College, because education is so important to me. I have 4 children. They all have doctorates, 2 in education and 2 in public service. The emphasis on education in my family has been very strong. Both my daughters are teachers also, and my wife was a retired teacher from 42 plus years. And I have dabbled in education through junior achievement because I think education is so important. My son and I formed a nonprofit organization called Saving Our Sons and Sisters International, and that was primarily designed a little over 10 years ago to address the issue of Black males not achieving at the same rate of other groups, as well as dropping out of school at a higher rate than in the groups. We wanted to understand why that was happening and to develop solutions. So over a 10-year period, we found different solutions from working from college all the way through to high school, to middle school, to elementary school, to find what were the causes and also to find what the solutions are. And right now we are launching a major project called Building Stronger Families, because we started out working individually focused on Black males, then Black females. Then we realized how the important role that the families play in that process. So all of this ties into me. That's who I am. I love helping people. I love giving of my time and my talents. I will be 74 years old tomorrow. And I look back over my life and I think about all of the things that I've accomplished, where I've been, the people I've met, the things that have impacted my life over 74 years. And I think about what can I do within the next 6 years to give as much of that back to the world as I possibly can, starting with my community, little small community in Jackson, Georgia, which has about 27,000 people, about 25% Black. And I try to give as much back to that community as well as other communities, and also give it back to Africa. So that's me kind of in a big nutshell.
Right. Well, happy early birthday. Obviously, that's something that is a tremendous honor to have a blessing every single year to celebrate another birthday. When we get into the Pan-Africanism movement, it's actually nothing new. I mean, it's been around for a long time. You can go back to Marcus Garvey. Other people in the Pan-Africanism movements has this belief that we, particularly as Black people, should expand the diaspora throughout the global world, from Africa to the Caribbean. It's something here in the United States. You see a tremendous trend now of many, particularly Black Americans and other Black people, looking to return home to Africa, West Africa in particular. But basically, the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce is kind of fairly new in the big sense. And could you kind of explain a little bit about the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce as a starting point towards this topic of the Pan-Africanism?
Yeah, let me give you the background behind this and why the Pan African American Chamber was formed.
Mhm.
I participated in the um, National Summit on Africa, which was created by I should not say created, but was started or initiated by former Ambassador Andy Young back it was around 2000, right before 2000, and the objective was to create a plan of how we could have a major impact in Africa. So it was set up so that there was a white paper that had several different issues of what are the issues in Africa and how can we address those, whether it was health issue or whether it was water, whether it was environmental, whether it was economics, and in several regions, I think it was 4 regions of the country, they set up meetings where they would present the white paper to potential delegates. We would give input to solutions to address the problems of Africa. And it rolled up into a final report that was presented to Congress, I believe in 2000, where the AGOA Act, the American Growth and Opportunity Act, was approved by Congress under President Bill Clinton. So we went to Washington on that day, and President Clinton talked a little bit about it, and Congress passed it. And AGOA was supposed to be a grand solution for that. Now, when we spent about a year developing that paper and presenting it, and after that meeting in Washington, D.C., we were asked to go back to our communities and form African societies. to educate people and to get more people involved, in particular African Americans involved in that. And as a result of that, I became one of the leaders in organizing and pulling together the delegates and forming an African society. And out of that African society, other groups went out and formed organization. There was one particular young man and his son, Dr. Tokes Abanjo, was a part of our group. And over a period of time, the group uh, made some significant accomplishments and then kind of fizzle out. And Dr. Tokes had formed this organization. Was out of the movement, I think probably for about 5 years. And he called me and asked me if I would come in and talk to him about heading up the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce. And so I went in for an interview to do that. And during the interview, he said before we even finished the meeting that you're going to be the CEO of the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce. And I gladly accepted that challenge and that opportunity because it had been dormant for several years, and he knew my capabilities in terms of building organizations, building teams, and so he asked me to do what I had done for the Africa Society, the Georgia Africa Society, for the Pan African American Chamber of Commerce. So I took that role. I lost track of time. I think that was about 4, 5 years ago. I'm not even sure when I started, but I gladly took on that role because I wanted to get back involved with Africa, and this offered me an opportunity to do that. And the role that I saw the Pan African American Chamber of Commerce is to be a bridge. I try to keep it simple, not too complicated. To be a bridge to Africa, a bridge for African Americans who want to do business in Africa, and a bridge for Africans who want to do business in America. Now, that's not excluding any other race, but I'm particularly interested in African Americans doing business in Africa. And the reason for that is on my trips to Africa and South Africa and Kenya and Uganda, an African would say to me, let me ask you a question. Why is it that European, Asians come to Africa, they look, they see, they get involved, and they do business? But the African Americans, they come, they look, they see, they entertain, and they go back home. And we don't understand that because we really would prefer doing business with African Americans than we would with the Europeans. However, but because they don't come and get involved, that doesn't happen. So that bothered me. And I didn't want to be one of those people because it was talking about me too. And I didn't want to be one of those people who just come look and get excited and go home and do nothing. So this has allowed me an opportunity to take it to another level. You know, I do consulting coming out of corporate America on next level performance. In order to get to the next level of performance, you need to know what your current performance is. And as I looked out over what we have been doing in Africa and that statement that was made, and I saw that what was not happening was African Americans taking a real serious interest in doing business in Africa because they really don't understand. Now, one of the major issues is exposure. And what I looked at was, and I realized that most, and I mean most, African Americans really don't know anything about Africa. And the reason for that is, when is the last time you've seen an African city in the media? You don't see it. The only thing we see about Africa in the media is a famine or wars, something, or animals. That's the only thing you see. And I realized that if you don't educate Africans on African Americans, they go by what they have seen in the media, the Tarzan movies, the famine, and you hear about all of the negative things about Africa. So we have to educate them on what Africa is really all about, which takes me to the recent first historical Black college and university Pan-African Global Trade and Investment Conference that we had in the Atlanta University Center here in Atlanta, and which was hosted by Clark Atlanta University. And the objectives of that conference were threefold. One was to get historical Black colleges and African universities to collaborate with each other. I believe the number says 65% of Africans are 35 years old and younger, which means that you have a new generation of leaders that are rising up in Africa, and they need to be developed. Now, we know the HBCUs had a major impact on Blacks in America after slavery because we were not totally equipped to emerge into the society and not only be contributors, but to take advantage of opportunities. So education was very important. So the HBCUs became a conduit to educate us and train us and develop us so that we could be competitive in society. So Mr. Mandela said education is the most powerful tool that can change the world. And I've found that that is very true. I saw the documentary on his life and not realizing how poor he was. And one of the things that his grandmother said when she gave him to the king, I want you to make sure that he is well educated. So here's a man that became educated, who was thrown in jail for 27 years, came out of jail and became president of South Africa. Now, let me go back to this Pan-African Trade and Investment Conference. So the first thing was to get the college and universities to collaborate. The second was to get the African American businesses and the African business to collaborate, because there's some Africans who want to do business in America, they need partners, and there's some African Americans who want to do business in Africa. It's better to do that in a partnership than to go and try to do it on your own. The third leg objective was to make students aware of why they need to be interested in Africa while they're in college, and how to get engaged in Africa and to get engaged in Africa trade. Now, we accomplished those first two objectives, but we did not accomplish that third one with the student. And we've done an assessment of what went wrong with that piece.
Well, excuse me, Charles.
Me.
Charles, could I just ask a question before we get
Sure.
into the student level and the educational level? And I do have some other questions I would like to ask you what we're talking about. First of all, when you say the people in Africa were not satisfied, or they was hoping that they would be able to do more business with the African American people here in the United States, wouldn't it be fair enough to say that, and this might come across the wrong way, but it's not intended to mean anything negative, but before we can try to go as Black Americans and Black people here in America to, let's say, do business and resolve issues abroad and network abroad, that we need to do a lot better job of doing business here at home. It's the old saying, charity starts at home. And I don't want to mix apples and oranges together because it's not a fair assessment. But when the Black dollar is going out of the Black community, let's say 6 hours, no more than 1 day, the Black ownership of media businesses is dwindled down. Now, we have a lot of successful Black businesses. I mean, a city like Atlanta stands out as one of the best in the country. But when you look at it as a whole and look at how Black businesses and how we do business with each other here in the United States, would it be better or needed to say that we need to fix and do business better here before, as a whole, we can step into international trade? or can you do both simultaneously? Can you still do business better and effectively here in the United States for Black people, and at the same time establish international trade and do business abroad in Africa?
I'm for doing both at the same time, and let me tell you why. In 1991, when I came out of corporate America, I met a young man who's the same age as I am. His name was Bill Cannon. He was a lobbyist in the General Assembly in Georgia for Black business. And he was lobbying to get the state of Georgia to do more business with Blacks, with minorities. Um, uh, Cynthia McKinney was a state representative or a senator, one of the two. But she did a bill to get the state to do a parity study. And Bill Cannon was the person that did that parity study to find out how much business the state was doing with Black folks, minorities. Then it was categories of minority. And what he found was that the state was spending less than 2% with minority businesses. Now, so the governor, when they did the report, the governor was embarrassed about it. So he put out an executive order to send to all of his departments to say, make a concerted effort to do business with minorities. And we knew what was going to happen with that is that the department heads were going to say, we can't find them. So we formed an organization called Georgia Summit of African American Businesses Organizations, GASABO. And we went around the state using that article to get the state departments to come to a meeting, and we would bring Black businesses to those meetings. And as a result of those meetings, using that executive order and bringing the Blacks, we satisfied their issue of we can't find them. So we asked if we could find Black businesses, will you do business with them? So the result of that turned out positive, is that a lot of the Blacks that came, they started getting business with the state. But what we had told the Black businesses, when you do business, when we help you to get business, we want you to help other Blacks. We want you to hire other Blacks, and we want you to get other Blacks involved. Well, that didn't happen. They would get business and they'd go off on their own and wouldn't do anything to help anybody else, including the organization. So we realized, okay, we need to also address this issue of Blacks doing business with Blacks. Because what we did is we developed seminars, and we went to all of the secondary cities in the state of Georgia, Macon, Savannah, Augusta, Rome, and we pulled together Black businesses, educators, government officials, students, and we did a presentation. And about that time, I think it was University of Georgia came out with this report that showed how much money Blacks were spending. Okay, and you've probably seen that report. And so we showed them that report, and we asked the question of them, how much business are you doing with Blacks? And I guarantee you, we start keeping data, most of the Blacks were not doing business with Blacks. And we asked why. We did surveys in each community, asked why. Well, we don't know about them. They charge too much. The customer service not good. They came up with all kinds of reasons. Okay, if we could fix these issues, would you do business with Blacks? And if you do business with Black, here's what we expect in return. That those businesses would do business and support the community, whether it's the churches or whatever, athletics in the community, whatever. So everybody that benefits from it needs to help the other group. That's the way you get people to do it, because we realize if the business community develop a plan to do that, the churches wouldn't buy into it. The educators wouldn't buy into it. The public would. So everybody needs to participate in that process. So GASABO did that for about 7, 8 years. And we had some successes in some of the cities where we got people to actually carry out those plans, and actually Blacks doing business with Blacks and Blacks collaborating with each other, and so on and so forth. Now, what I found is the same thing, similar thing happens in Africa in terms of doing business. However, I think in Africa, Africans tend to do more business with Africans. However, but if they have we have more alternatives than they do. Okay. So they are kind of locked into doing business with each other on the most part. We're not. And integration, and I know you've heard this before, integration helped us, but it also hurt us
Right.
because in we had thriving businesses on Martin Luther King. It wasn't Martin Luther King, it was Hunter Street then, Auburn Avenue, uh, and we had on hospitals, we had everything. Well, doing integration, we stopped doing business with ourselves and we started taking our business downtown to somebody else because we were deprived of it. We thought, well, now we're free to do this, but we hurt ourselves in it. So we got to go back to that. And you're right. We need to address the issue here. One of the advantages we have here in Atlanta is that we have probably a larger population of Black businesses than any other group. Not only that, we have a larger population of very large businesses, particularly because of Atlanta and that Atlanta airport and what Maynard Jackson and I forget his name. It's going to come to me in a minute. But what our leaders did in terms of creating policies in terms of the set asides for the airport for minority businesses. Now, again, the intent was not to just make a bunch of Black businesses rich, but to get them to also hire other Blacks to do business. So my answer to your question is, I've dabbled in all of that. I've realized that we got to do more business with each other, and we don't keep our dollars winning. But see, that part of that is an education process, and part of that is a process of showing people what's in it for them. You got to be willing to collaborate with other people, and you got to be willing to support each other in that process, regardless of whether you're doing business in Africa or whether you're doing business next door. I hope I answered your question.
You did. And, Chuck, I think one thing when you get into Pan-Africanism, because that's kind of what I still want to tie this topic into, because we can obviously talk about businesses here in America. And I don't know if people would classify that as a Pan-Africanism movement. And I think, and I'm not an expert in the Pan-Africanism movement, but obviously the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce, I believe it's designed on a business model. Some people say it's other factors that you have to include when you're talking about Pan-Africanism, towards being liberated, towards being free, actually to some degree towards returning home to Africa. I still believe personally you can be successful doing business with Africa and still be able to live and reside in the United States or anywhere else throughout the world. So I don't think, when I hear people saying it's time to leave America, we can't function here as a whole, return home to Africa, I don't think that's 100% necessary. I think you can still do business and interact, especially today with technology, how we're doing this right now via Zoom. Traveling, yes, is very critical. It's very vital. It gives you a tremendous amount of education, as you mentioned. It broadens your horizon. But I think the focus on the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce towards one of its big goals towards doing business with Africa. But when you're doing business, let's say with Africa, is it just helping Africa, or is it a mutual thing where not only is the business model of international trade helping Africa, but it's also helping Blacks throughout the world as well? That's kind of like a question I'm asking you in the comment.
Well, let me touch on two things there. One is we're not just focused on helping Africa, even though Africa is a prime target, because we know that there are other countries that are taking advantage of Africa. And remember what I said, they prefer, in many cases, they prefer doing business with us, but we don't do it. We're not investing in Africa. So they end up doing business with China, or doing business with Russia. And because one of the other things I realized, when President Biden came in, and I believe the new strategy is called Africa Rise. Okay. And I got all excited about that new strategy because I believe that he really does sincerely want to help Africa. Right before that, we were working with the Exim Bank, and we were planning to do some major business ventures in Africa. And we started looking on the government website to see what enhancements were being made. Now, this is before the Biden administration came in. And what we realized is they had no intent of doing anything to increase the import export in Africa. They only had one thing in mind, that was to export to Africa, not import from Africa. Well, interesting. Now, having said that, it still takes an initiative. You can come up with an initiative, a policy, a law, and all that, but it's how you implement it will determine whether you're going to get the results that you want to get. And here's what I see happening different. But again, we can't depend on government to do this. We have to do this. But again, a part of it, you got to educate African Americans on why they should do it and what the impact is of doing this. And look at it from this perspective. Now, we know without a doubt, Africa have more of the resources that run the world than any other continent in the world. But who controls those? And who's taking advantage of those? Now, I listened to a video of a gentleman speaking to a group, and he said, we have to make sure that our Africa does not prosper, because if Africa prosper, it's going to hurt the rest of the countries. So we have to keep Africa down. I mean, these were his exact words, and this is a group that meets on a regular basis to discuss how they can keep Africa down so that we can help the rest of the world. And he spoke of it as if, well, we're sacrificing Africa so the rest of us can prosper. And I realized that there's a strategy to keep Africa down. The other thing I realized, and again, this is part of the education process, because people would like to say, well, one of the reasons that Africa is in bad shape because of the leaders, they're always giving away this and they do this and they allow other people to take advantage and they're getting money in the table. Okay, I got all that. When I went to Africa, I think this was maybe my second or third trip, and somebody mentioned, do you know about the Scramble for Africa? I said, Scramble for Africa, what's that? He said, the 5 nations came in and broke Africa up into 5 parts. They each took a part of Africa and they controlled Africa. So I came to the realization that Africa is not corrupt and messed up because of Africa. It's corrupt and messed up because other people went in and tore Africa apart. You're familiar with Scramble for Africa?
No, I'm not, to be honest.
Okay, I sent you 2 articles earlier in the week, and one is about the Scramble for Africa. When I came back, I was interviewed by a newspaper, and they printed that article about the Scramble for Africa. So one says Scramble for Africa. The other one talked about the potential in Africa for doing business in Africa. And this was on a trip that I went representing small business with Mayor Campbell back in, I think, 2005. And so we really have, and it's not just where the Pan-Africanism comes from. It's not just doing business with Africa, but wherever Africans are. It could be the Caribbean. We have to, we got to help. Everybody else helps their own race, but we're the only ones that don't. I had a friend who was involved in the Gasabo group. He said, and he was a county commissioner in one of the small counties. He said, my wife is Korean. He said, do you know that they will go 3 counties over to find another Korean to do business with?
Mm-hmm.
We're the only group that does not do business with each other. The Hispanics do it. Even the Caribbeans do it. When they come to Atlanta, they find the other ones that do business with each other. But we don't do it. The Black Americans don't do it. But let me tell you why. We found out why that happens. Okay. If you say blacks do business with blacks, somebody will say, even blacks would say something negative, because we were promoting doing business with black, and there have been several do business with black movements, and somebody would say, well, why would we do that? Why would we want to do that? Isn't that discrimination? Well, other people do it. Well, the problem with us is, and this was part of our education process in Gasabo, is to explain to people what your habits are and why you do things this way. If you I have to correct some friends every now and then. They say, "Well, I tried using a black business, and the quality wasn't good, or the customer service was bad, and they mistreated me. I'm never going to do business with a black business again." Well, do you do that when you do a white business? Do you say if you got bad service, you're never going to do that again? We're the only group that says I'm never going to do business with blacks again when it happens. Instead of finding another black, we say we're not going to deal with them at all, period. But we've been conditioned to think that way because people don't want us to work together. And
Right.
we have to change our whole mindset of we have to help each other to cross those barriers and to get out of that mindset and realize that we can benefit ourselves by helping ourselves.
Right. And I think another thing even when you say the Caribbeans, blacks who come to America, they have a better track record of doing business. I think they have a different upbringing in
Yes.
Caribbean countries than blacks Americans have here. And almost they want to come and assimilate and fit in, but they're not willing to give up everything that they have. They're not willing to give up their culture. They're a part of their history. We all of a sudden as black people here in America like to feel more satisfied when we can integrate and do businesses with other races of our people. And I don't know if there's a magic wand to resolve this problem because the numbers just don't speak strongly enough when your dollar's going out of your community within 6 hours. Let's put it simple. If you was to spearhead a big movement across America and saying you want to do international trade, investments with countries in Africa, because Africa is a continent. So let's say countries like Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, and you came and said, well, can every black person come up with $1 per day, which would equal about $5 to $7 per week? Money that you will probably blow buying Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, coffee, or whatever, miscellaneous dollars, and you can add more. You would probably have most black people in America finding more excuses and reasons why they can't invest money into something like a movement to do international trade than they can find a reason for. And I think until we see a better example, and I agree with what you're saying, you can still do both. You can work on international trade and work on establishing international investments with countries in Africa, and you can still try to do business here in America. But the track record alone just don't seem like it's strong enough as a whole group of people. I think one great example that you could look at in America to say black people do a great job of group economics is your churches, particularly your mega churches. And I don't know if that's the best solution, but look at the realities. You got a large congregation of black membership, black people who go to churches. You can fund and group money up in your congregation pretty much overnight. Some people would say, now, what does that money do outside of your congregation? What does it do beyond that? I think one great example is the Greater Allen, I guess the Greater Allen Cathedral Church in Jamaica, New York. Pastor Floyd Flake has done a tremendous job in developing businesses outside of the church. But I think you have to, at some point, start with something. And I think what you're doing is an excellent starting point. And, oh, yeah, that educational piece about how you want to get young people in college to develop something about Pan-Africanism. Could you kind of explain that, what you said that you wanted to discuss in particular?
Yeah, because see, or keep in mind what I said at the beginning. They don't really know Africa because it's not in the social media. It's nobody really talks about it except from a negative perspective.
Mm.
And keep in mind, the civil rights movement in America really didn't take off until students got involved. When SNCC got involved, it raised it to a different level. And part of the reason for that, well, and Morris Brown, by the way, was the staging ground for those protests, because students don't have the barriers and the weight that adults have. You can go and do things. You have the freedom to do things. You're not locked into a 20-year job that you're afraid you're gonna lose. You're not worked into in most cases a house payment, car payment, all that. You're kind of free to do things different. And your mindset is different, because when you come to a college environment, no matter how smart you are, it's where the valedictorians realize that they weren't a real valedictorian. Now they're meeting valedictorian from somewhere else that has taken more courses than they have, and they're smarter than they are. So your mind is more open to receive new ideas and new thoughts of how you can do things. And keep in mind what I said earlier, 65% of the Africans are 35 and younger. So we need our younger people connecting with those younger generations that are going to be coming into leadership in Africa. And those who are coming into leadership in Africa are making change, because they're no longer going to accept the status quo. That's why you see a lot of this activity that's going on in Africa now, with them rebelling against the United States and France and other countries that have been taking advantage of them for years. These young folks says, ain't happening no more. We're done with that. We're going to change the way things are done here, and we're gonna do more to help our people. If you're not helping us, we're not going to let you do business here. So we have to start that process at the college level, and eventually we'll get down to the secondary level. But we got to start that on college level, because that's where movements get planted and grow very fast, because of the openness and the energy that college students carry. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And unfortunately, Charles, we're out of time on this particular segment, or we're running out of time. Always have the luxury of bringing you back for part 2, if anything that we missed on this particular episode. And I thought it was a real interesting learning experience, just kind of scratching the surface. And definitely, I have your contact information, and I will definitely look into possibly interviewing other people from the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce, and other areas throughout the countries of Africa in the very near future. Any last words very briefly before we end this segment? Feel free to do so.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to do this interview today, because it's very timely. As I mentioned, we just finished this first HBCU Pan-African Global Trade and Investment Conference in the Atlanta University Center 2 weeks ago. It ended on the 10th of October, I think it was, somewhere thereabouts. And I would like to be able to post this on the Pan-African American Chamber website if possible. But again, I thank you for the opportunity, because it's very timely, because I got a lot to talk about, and I'm excited about that conference, because to see the Africans and the African Americans come together. And let me just say one more thing. There were some 2 young African students who are 17 years old, and they play these African instruments. And they are mentees to my son and I. And when they came to the event, they asked if I could allow them to participate on the program, and they did. Now, keep in mind, you got Africans and African Americans involved in this. And they were invited to come to Zambia to present. Now, see, that was just exposure to them. They had no idea that was going to happen. They just came to entertain. So my point is, if you give people exposure, you never know what's going to happen.
Those are going to have to be our last words, and that's a very good last statement that you made. And I, again, had enjoyed this particular conversation with you, the CEO of the Pan-African American Chamber of Commerce, no other than Chuck Barlow Sr. And for people out there on this edition of Face to Face, I look forward to seeing you next week, if it's God's will. Thank you, and goodbye, Charles. All right.